start the recording here. We are going to record this. I'll stick it back out with a note. It'll be out on our Google Drive I'm figuring for a month or two, and then we'll pull it back off again, so if anybody wants to watch it. So we'll go with that on the thing. Okay, I want to welcome everybody. We had a good turnout concerning the weather, so that was good. So couple things. We have some new people wandering around someplace, so if you want to just stand and tell us who you are, that would be nice. You in the back there?
Hi, my name is Ben Fry. Kind of found out from this group from Mike, who you probably know, and just how I quit turning and a little more.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
I'm Danny Gonzalez, and I found out from Guy. I don't know your last name. Sorry.
He's been in class maybe 15 times.
Oh, okay.
And I'm here to learn more and dive deep into learning how to successfully make lathing objects.
Oh, sounds good. Thank you.
Andre Marshall, Mike introduced me to this. Never thought I'd get into turning, but Mike's been bugging me and showing me some stuff, so thought I'd come and see what it's all about. Thanks.
Oh, that sounds good. And in the back?
I'm Joe Garrett. Guy Schaefer lives across the street from me. He got me here. I've done a lot of turning in Arizona, but just starting here.
Good, thank you.
Jim Bateson, and I had a class with Guy on making a fitted thing, and during the club, and I thought we could just do more work.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Betty Hopper, and took a class from Gary on Monday on beginning wood bowl turning, so that will check out.
It's Jim.
And Jim.
Oh, okay, so a husband and a wife. That's very nice. Very nice indeed. Okay, we got, welcome all you guys. Glad you came and hope you like us. On the back, I printed out our roster for what we have, so if you have a chance, check and making sure your name, address, phone number, email address is correct on there, on it. If you've paid your dues, I appreciate it. If you haven't, please do so on it. The building here, we've done a bunch of renovations on it, so one of the things is we put electronic locks. They got electronic locks put on the doors, so we don't have to go searching for keys all the time or run down to the Paramount and get a key and that sort of thing. So it makes it easier for our instructors and for people that are doing open shop and that sort of thing. So that was one of the big improvements we did. If you notice all the yellow cords hanging from the floor, that's part of the electric upgrade that went in. So we got drop cords put in. Outlets in behind the TVs and up in the front, some more into the back. We just switched off. The lights that are off are the main lights that we used before, and when you have just those in here, you really can see how dark it was in here when you were trying to do anything. So that was a big improvement for it. So we'll be keeping going on some of that stuff there. We're working on the camera and video equipment a little bit. So we got stuff to learn on how to do it and more to install on it. That's one reason why I'm trying to figure out why I can't get this to reverse the image on it. But we'll figure it out as it goes along. Just as a show of hands, how many people looked at the video from last month? You guys should be proud of yourselves. That's more than we had ever looked at the Zoom recordings. Just in the one time on it. It seemed like on Zoom we'd have one or two people maybe a month that would look at the recordings from them. So that's really good. I appreciate that. I want to talk about open shop a little bit. So open shops are the first Thursday and the second Tuesday of the month on it. The next open shop is going to be March 14th, April 6th, and April 11th. We're kind of looking for, we'd like to have somebody from the turning club be there on each one, so in case somebody else wants to turn, they need a little advice, you know. It's always safer if you have two people that know how to turn, that you don't do anything real ridiculous. So we'll be trying to set up a little sign up for that. So, you know, one of the things you're asked when you join is if you could, you know, move a little time to the club and volunteer some things. So that's one of the things that you could do on it. It's not that you have to teach somebody, but it's kind of maybe give a little advice, you know, tell them they're not doing something safely, you know, get a laid out whatever on the thing. So that's going on. I want to invite you. I plan on being around until 2 o'clock unless it starts blowing snow in the door. So if you want to stay after the meeting, you know, you want to get laid out and do something, you want to just talk, you want to look at some of the video stuff, it's kind of an open time for you. So to stick around for a couple hours and see what's going on. Send a couple notes out about the Paramount setting up their classes for this fall. So if you're interested at all in teaching on it, Gary's offered to let you sit through a couple of his classes and see what it's like. I've got a printout on the back that's the letter on it, so if somebody wants one of those, be sure to just grab it. Right now they're looking at April 15th to get it ready so that they can get it to the printer and get that ready to go. Then it'll come out in mid-June, so do that on the thing. Arts Underground is doing really well. Guy says most of the time it's double the number of people lays that we've got in there. So that's going really well on it. So if you're interested in that part of it, you're interested in learning how that runs, you know, Guy probably could use a little help on that part. So let him go with that. The classes that the Paramount's running for woodworking is pretty well. They're selling out. There seems to be a lot of interest in it, so if you're at all interested in those types of classes, keep it going. Let the Paramount know that, you know, you're interested in doing more on it. Art Crawl is going to be June 16th, will be the first one, and then again in August and October, and we will be looking for somebody who kind of wants to take charge of that as far as scheduling people in and stuff. Last couple of years we've set up a couple lays out there. Gary's carved. Brenda has done some wood burning out there. Go ahead, Guy.
The one that's going to be in front of the Paramount is the 16th
16th
of June. They're going to close the street off for that.
Oh, the whole street between the thing? Oh, that sounds really good. So it's always been it's a good time. It's fun to visit with people and, you know, bring something little in that you can turn in a little while, or something you want to finish off or something. It works really good. Is everybody, you know, we've got a Facebook page. We've been sending out the newsletters, you know, with the blasts on the thing. Hopefully everybody is getting their emails like they're supposed to. If you're not getting emails, if you don't hear from me, you know, a couple times a month at least on the thing, let me know, you know, because I probably have your address in someplace wrong. So, like I say, I've got it all printed out in the back. Take a look at it and make sure it's right. There is an updated membership list on the web. So, and I'll send out a reminder of what the password is to get into that to the members again here this week. Okay. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up? Okay. See, we got a few things in for the instant gallery. If you want to, you know, you can go grab your stuff and bring it up and tell us what you did, and we'll take a peek at it. Anybody who wants to talk about their stuff they brought? Guy does. Okay.
I use a loud voice. I got 5 cherry bowls here. The reason I did that is because I have all these someone, I think it was Albert Keppers, when he died, we got a bunch of his turn blanks, first turn. And so they're sitting there, and so anyway, if you want to take one of these, they're all cherry blanks. You can turn it and keep it yourself. You can turn it and donate it back to the club for the empty bowls, which is going to be in September sometime.
Yeah.
So that's why I got all those cherry bowls. I just took the once turned and did the finished turning. So you're more than welcome to take the first turn, not the ones that are finished. But they're really nice. You have to reround the tenon, but that's a good activity to learn how to do that too. That's why that's there.
This past week I posted a challenge.
Hold on for a second here.
This past week, Guy posted a challenge on Facebook or suggested return eggs, and I thought I could do that this week. So I had a piece of English U that a friend gave me, and it was really wet, a lot wetter than I thought it was going to be. So it was easy to turn, but it was too wet to finish. So I got a bit aggressive with the microwave, resulting in a crack. But of course, it's, you know, what I thought was probably pretty simple thing. So we've got one cracked egg in the bowl.
You want to tell about the bowl?
Oh, the bowl I made last year, just a piece of ash. No big deal. I need something for my eggs so it doesn't roll off the table and crack further.
You don't use it to darn socks?
No.
Yeah, since it's a segmented day, I brought in a bowl that I made in one of the classes that I took. And so it looks very similar to the one that's up front because it was a class project. And I was thrilled because it's one of the few bowls I've made that didn't blow up. And since segmenting can be also used for more than one thing, I have a segmented pen. I got a blank from Guy that is all pieced together out of bits and pieces, and I love the way it turned out. So if you're interested. Okay, I have a little piece I'm experimenting, a little flower. It's holly, and I think it's red heart for the little finial. I'm trying to get, knowing me, it's smaller and smaller and smaller to do some little flowers that I can put on larger pieces later. So, still experimenting. Yes.
I did this one a while ago, and the hardest thing about doing something at a tapering like this was trying to get the radiator clamps to stay on. So what I did is I glued pieces of wood there to hold the clamp on there and stuff. Because I tried rubber bands and stuff like that, and it just slid down and didn't do it. But anyway, it turned out okay.
What kind of dirt? I didn't catch.
Birch and I think this is walnut or mahogany, and then open it up.
I didn't really bring this for show and tell, but the guy grabbed it on my hand, and it's just a piece of firewood that I picked up, and they're kind of fun to make. I know you can buy these at Locker or Woodcraft, but if you want to get, if you're just playing around and want to do it a little cheaper, you can buy the cups and peel, cut the plastic off of it and just use the liner. But they're fun to do. Just well, it's got linseed oil, shellac base, and rattle can lacquer on it. So, yeah, I could use a buff job again, but
How did you do the red band? That just
Well, I put the lines in and then I just used a knurling tool. And I just use it like a Sharpie for a red one. Yeah.
Bob, bring anything for the instant gallery? Yeah. Jump in there. All right.
So I'm new here, and I made this pen. It's a Bethlehem olive wood, and it's a antique pewter nautical sailing pen kit. And I got the privilege to work with Bill and Guy at Arts on the Ground, and I appreciate their help and all the stuff that they've taught me through Arts on the Ground, and I hope to see you all guys here further and show my work. But yes.
Very good. Dad, well, we don't even let you take your coat off.
Yeah. Brought a couple things in. And this is an American elm bowl. It had some nice figure, crotch running through it, and I don't know, it just finished up rather nicely, and I have a slightly larger lathe at home now. Oops, there, now we can show it for the camera. So I can do a little bigger throw on the size that I turn, and I like the outcome of that one. And then, some of you know I've done scoops and things, and this is just a dough spoon, basically. It's got a nice sturdy shank on the shaft. And this was not necessarily a multi-axis turning. It's not like I spun it this way to get the cylindrical shape and then put it in this way to open up the bowl on the spoon. I introduced then my spoon carving tools to get to it. Walnut, the wood was dry, and walnut, you know, it has a silica content that can slow down a knife pretty fast. I ended up buying some drill-mounted burrs, probably, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of an inch, a little smaller, maybe 5/8. And that allowed me to open up the bowl of the spoon. So just something I was tinkering with, and thought I'd come and show it. Anybody else up next? Oh.
How'd you do that?
Takers?
No?
Okay.
So I'm going to gather the names and we'll have drawing.
Okay. I think we're ready for Gary to start here, so I'm going to switch this guy back around this way.
Okay. A few months ago, I shared with you guys that I've been enjoying taking the least likely wood to turn and put it on my lathe. What I do is I've got a friend who's got a sawmill that I help out every so often, and I'll take the scrap wood, when you put a log on and make that first cut to flatten the board, all the knobs and the branches and the stuff that's on there just go into a reject pile for firewood. And so I'll go in there and cut out pieces that I like. And this is a piece of white oak that has got some really unique character to it. It had a branch that came through, I think it started here and it came out here, and then another one that came through here, and it was just all kinds of crazy stuff. But what I wanted to just share with you quick is that it had a real punky area in it. And I'll pass this around just so you know what I'm talking about. And I've seen that before. John Kay's not here. I didn't see John, did I?
He's not.
John had one in his garage. He asked me one day, what would you do with that? I don't know how to finish it. And it got my wheels turning, and then when I had a piece of my own, what I've done is I used a combination of wood filler and melt paint. Now, are you all familiar with what melt paint is? It's different than chalk paint. Melt paint is actually Portland cement. It's ground up real fine and natural pigments are put in it. So the question I always ask my students is, do you know why most barns, especially on the East Coast, were painted red? Because it was easy for the farmer to make their own paint. They would use Portland cement, and they would take a jar or a container, put some vinegar in there and some nuts and bolts, some old nails, and leave it sit for a few days. And when you do that, it doesn't really look that different. It still looks like just darkened vinegar, but when it's oxidizes, when it's exposed to the air, it turns red, or that brownish red. So farmers realize that if you, in the process of churning butter back in the day, or making cheese, you always had to weigh. And you know, these settlers were pretty darn efficient with what they used, and water was a huge commodity that they cherished. If you were lucky enough to have a stream on your property, great, otherwise you had to dig a well, wells went dry, and all of that. So they would reuse that water that was byproduct of the cheese and butter and mix it in to mix up this paint. Well, it's the enzymes that's in the milk that turn the product to a creamy consistency, and it changes the drying properties of it, and it works great for paint. So I talk about the pioneers, but this goes far further back, that they found that most cave dwelling drawings were done with the same type of thing. They would take limestone, grind it up, mix it up, and painted the cave walls. There's a lot of Egyptian paintings that were done in milk paint. So this stuff goes back centuries. And what I like about it is it sits on the surface. So when some people would say, gee, I want something that penetrates the wood. In most cases, that wasn't an important part of it. They didn't want it bleeding, and that's what I like about it. Now I did all this talking, but to say that I don't know of any place in St. Cloud that offers it. One place in Bloomington, that's Woodcraft, sells it. I buy it off Amazon. It's sold by Woodcraft through Amazon. It's cheaper to go to Amazon and buy it, or Woodcraft if you're down there and buy it. You'll pay about 20 bucks for this, but it makes a quart of paint, which sells for about, 10 bucks at the stores these days. So anyway, what I do with that is I just use some acrylic wood filler, and I'll add the paint powder to it and mix it up. I typically, this one I use pitch black, it's called, so it's, and I also added, if it was getting a little thick, I added, this is another additive you can buy from the milk paint folks, that's a extra bond. So I wanted to make sure it stayed in there. So I used that and mixed it up into a paste, put a pair of vinyl gloves on, and I just forced it into all those things, and it just caked it all up. And the beauty of this is it sands off really easy. Just your standard aluminum oxide sanding disc, and it takes it right off and down to it. But anyway, it's got a unique look that I can pass that around and share it now that you know what I've done to it.
Gary, that doesn't absorb into the wood though, that it's all surface, right? So if you sand...
It sticks to the surface, but the pigments, one thing that this company claims is that it's all natural pigments. So like the black is actually pitch black from, I don't know if that's from the coal industry. So it's not a acrylic that's going to have a dye in it that absorbs into the wood. If you like that distressed look on furniture or something, milk paint is beautiful for that. Guy?
So you pretty much had the bowl finished, and then you added this.
Yeah, it wasn't finished yet. It wasn't, the final finish wasn't on it yet. It was raw. It was sanded to a point where...
But you had turned it to
yes.
the final.
Yes.
It just needed to be sanded.
Right.
So you didn't use chiseling to remove any of the...
Of the paint of the product? No. Nope. I just sanded it off, and it goes pretty quick. But what excites me is looking for more of that now that I want to start trying different colors. Well, what would happen if you did red or blue? You know, it might give it a real, something very unique. All right, is that it for the show and tell?
One more.
No, okay.
When you said it got a little thick and you used that additive,
Yep.
what's your definition? What kind of consistency?
What I would be looking for is about toothpaste. Yeah. And you could use water, I just happen to have this extra bonding agent there, so. And you can buy different brands of that at Home Depot and that. Any other questions on that one? Okay. All right, well.
Okay, hold on, Gary. So is that, oh, you got another one you're gonna do?
No.
Okay,
No.
you're in, okay. So, the 50/50 is closed, we got $37 in it, and we decided we were gonna start splitting, so we got a $10 split for somebody, and it's Jaden.
No, that's for the,
Oh, no, that was for bringing the,
that's for the raffle for the.
yeah, it's a $10 prize for bringing something in and showing it, and it's Jaden. So,
Way to
so
go.
not only did you get the thank you much. Okay, so we haven't done that. We'll do the drawing after Gary's done demonstrating.
All right.
So if anybody wants to go buy something real quick, that would be your absolute last chance. So otherwise, this month Gary's going to talk about segmenting. Next month, Guy Florick is going to do a little demonstration on something that he's brought out, and he's going to kind of get it ready and talk about, twice turning it, right?
Yeah.
And then how he runs it out and talk a little bit about when he takes it to sales. So, okay, Gary, you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
Go for it.
All right, well, I call this series, Foundation Series in Wood Turning that I teach at the Paramount. I've been teaching it since, I think, 2011. And I usually teach it twice a year, so I've gone through a lot of students on it, and we've had pretty good success with them. And
This one's feeding into
So-
the laptop right now.
I call it segmented
What he's
matrices.
doing is that one up there.
My first comment is that, okay. Why would you want to get into segmented turning in the first place? For me, every wood shop's got a pile of wood in the corner that is, gosh, it's too good to throw away, it's too nice to burn, but it's not quite long enough. What do I do with it? So I had a pile like this, and I had seen some segmented turning, so I was going to figure this out on my own. So what do? I take it to my table saw, I set the miter gauge, and I start just making segments, and then try to fit them all together. It's like, that don't work. It's, I get to the end, and I've got, most of them were 1 inch, and now I got one that I need a 1/2 inch one. And how do they do this? And I searched, now this was again back in 2009, 2010 when I started having an interest in it. And YouTube was just getting going, and there wasn't a lot of information online on how to do this. So I picked up this book through Craft Supply. It was a real motivating book for me. I don't know if it's in production anymore. You might not find it anywhere but Craft Supply. It was published by Dale Nish, who was the founder of Craft Supply out in Provo, Utah.
Still get it.
You still get it? Yeah. All right. What really motivated me about this guy, this Ray Allen, is that he was a foreman on a road crew down in New Mexico. And so he got into his early 50s, mid 50s, thinking, you know what, I'm going to be retiring in another 10 years, and what am I going to do with myself? I don't have any hobbies, but geez, every ditch that we're work site, there's always wood logs laying there, trees down. So he started collecting wood from the work sites and brought it home, and then it sat in his garage for another X number of years. And so at 65 he retires, and it was the first time he touched a lathe was at 65. And he got into doing segmented work with these small pieces of wood. This guy, if you go down there, I've been to galleries down in New Mexico that you'll see his work. He's got to be just super renowned. He's got a lot of information on how to make some of the various embellishments, I'll call it, or the accent features. So you can take a look at this book. I think it's worth having. His way is a little different than how I do it. But so what I like about doing this segmenting, for you to get into it, it doesn't take a whole lot. You probably have it laying in your shop right now. Glue. I like the tight bound glue. I'm not going to put in a lot of work and use a cheap glue. And I'm not saying tight bond is the best glue, but it's one that I'm most familiar with and readily available in the stores. You'll use paper towels. We're going to work with a lot of glues, and it can be messy. Wax paper helps, doesn't need to be, and masking tape, and then we'll talk a little bit about the spray adhesive and why and how I use that. So, come on. All right, tool-wise, this is showing you a whole lot more than you need. You basically need some type of a protractor. This is one that you can buy at most of the big box stores. It's a very simple one, about $5. That's all you really need. If you're going to get into it, I recommend a scientific calculator. Most of your phones have that feature on it, but you're going to be working with an algebraic equation that makes it real easy just to punch in. A ruler and a caliper. You know, when I got into it, the only thing they had was, and I don't recall how the pronunciation was, a Vermeer, caliper, veneer, not veneer, it's veneer. and that worked great. Gosh, then I bought a digital one, and this was 15 years ago when I bought my first one. I think I paid $140 for the darn thing, but I thought it was really cool. It's the same one, right? This one right now is from Fleet Farm, $11. So get yourself a digital caliper. The cool one. I'm so sorry. This is my my planning for this was a mouse click, and unless I have the settings right. Okay. So the biggest challenge, as I mentioned, when I tried starting this was, how do I cut these angles, and how do I measure them? What do I, you know, there's got to be a plan to it. There's got to be something. So a little bit of research, and I found that so what I found was that there's a couple of terms that you want to know, or so that you can understand it. 4 basic terms that you're going to use is the miter angle, the width. I'd say it's better defined as the depth of the segment, the thickness, and the length. That will make more sense here as I go on. But let's first start talking about building a picture frame. So if you think of a picture frame, think of that as a segmented ring. That's a 4-sided segmented ring. So what angles do I need to cut it at? What's a picture frame? It's basically 4 90-degree angles, correct? But how do you make that 45 or that 90 degree? You cut it. So the circle 4 times 90 is 360 degrees. So what we need to do is cut 2 45-degree angles to make that picture frame. That's referred to as complementary angles. So that was one of my challenges when I got going, is that, okay, I know that 90 degree, but you got to split it in half, because when 2 pieces go together, 2 45s go together, it makes your 90 degree. So what works out best, your dividend will always be 360 degrees when you figure out how many angles, how many segments you want to have. And there's just kind of a little bit of a chart here. You want to look at the divisor is the number of segments that you want. So if I'm going to do a 12-segmented ring, I'm going to be cutting my miter angle at 22.5 to make that, with 2 parts to make that.
15.
Yeah, okay. So the quotient will be the whole angle. So 16, so 6 divided by, now, let me go to the next slide, I'm getting a little lost here. So the minor angle is always divided by 2, so let's do one and go through it this way. So 360-degree circle. I'm going to divide that into 6 segments. So that's a 60-degree angle that I need. That's the minor angle, but I need to create 2 pieces to make that 60-degree angle, so I'm going to cut it at 30 degrees to put it together to create a 60-degree. So when it's glued together, I've got my 60-degree angle. All right, so what I like about segmented work is that this isn't like just throwing a piece of wood on and making whatever. I think the most common saying that beginning wood turners love to use is, I just let the wood talk to me. The wood tells me what it wants to do. I've been to many different symposiums and they'll use that reference and say, hey folks, I want to tell you something. Either that wood isn't talking loud enough, or you're not listening close enough, because that is not good. But so take that and say, what I want to do is plan my bowl. What size of bowl do I want to make? And what kind of woods I want to use? So you put a little bit of thought into it. So what I'll do is take a piece of paper, fold it in half and cut a shape out, unfold it, hold it out, tape it on the wall, walk back and look at it. Is that the shape that I want? And I might go back and trim a little bit more off until I get a nice looking shape that I like. And that's what you're going to stick with through the whole thing. So we take that sheet of paper and we're going to open it up. And here's where I'm going to use that spray adhesive. First time is I'll put a little spray adhesive on it, and I'm going to stick that to a piece of graph paper. Now, I've got some scales that I can work with. So I've got 3/4 inch squares. I know my wood is going to be 3/4 inch typical lumber that you're going to have readily available from the big box stores. I can do my shapes. I have to figure in a tenon there so that I can hold that bowl on the lathe, and that's built into it. And so I see my thickness is 3/4 inches. Then I take a pencil and I draw a line about what wall thickness. And I did that real quick to show you that it's not that critical, but I'm going for about a 1/4 inch wall thickness in my finished bowl. So I'm going to start with the base. Typically, you'll see most wood turners don't make a segmented base, because now you've got to make those wedges down to a point. It's really difficult. You've got a lot of glue in there, and if something is going to fail, it's probably going to be that bottom is going to open up. So a lot of wood turners use just solid wood for the bottom. What I will do is start out by taking this piece of wood and putting it on the lathe in a jam chuck affair where I just use the jaws of my chuck, bring my tailstock up. Now I've got a good solid mark there where my center is. I turn the tenon and I'll take some of the corners off and make the wood round. So now I've got my starting, it's not a ring, but it's my base. So what I'm going to do is for each ring that I make, I'm going to add a 1/4 inch to the drawn outer wall and the inner wall. So that's how wide I'm going to rip the board. So in this case, my first ring, and we're building this bowl here. So my first ring, I need to rip my board 1 5/8 wide. The next one is going to be 1 inch wide, 1/4 inch on either side of my drawn line and my inner wall thickness, 7/8, 1 inch. So I've got these all planned out in advance. The next step is some basic algebra. You might have learned that in the freshman year of high school. Is that I need to know the circumference of my ring. Circumference is diameter times pi. In this case, we're rounding it down to 3.15. So We build that out by saying, I've got a 6-inch bowl. I've added a 1/4 inch on either side, so I'm going to add a 1/2 inch to that 6-inch. So I've got 6.5 inches, that's the diameter of my bowl. I'm going to times it by pi to get my circumference, which is 20.42 inches. Now I'm going to divide it by the number of segments. In this case, it's 12. So that face of the so the length of my segment is 1.7 inches. And with this digital caliper, that's no problem at all. So what I'll do is I'll go over to my table saw and I will measure, that shows up. I'll kind of get a measurement of my stop to my blade. I'll take this, I'm not going to run the saw today, but I'll run that piece, take a measurement of it. How close am I? Add, subtract, make another cut, do it several times until I get that 1.7 inches. If it was 1.71, it's not that big a deal. But we want to strive for that. So what I wanted to emphasize in this is that to make that bowl, before I even touch the wood, I've already had my plan. And I draw this out, and I do all my calculations in advance before I even walk out in the shop. So I know that what each ring is going to be, what I need to cut them at, how many I need. There's a really cool, if you're into marketing your product, there's a really cool byproduct of this. Because, for example, this hollow form, I'll talk about that more later, but so it's all drawn out. Now this becomes my document of authenticity, that I talk a little bit about it, I write it on the back side and I sign it, because I'll never be able to reproduce this again. Exactly, so it's a one of a kind. And what the galleries tell me is that sells the piece. If they've got a document that shows how you made it, and that it's unique and your signature on it, you can pretty much double your asking price. So, kind of cool. So anyway, got it all done. For here, because I reproduced this bowl, I know how long boards I need to do, and they aren't probably as long as you might think. You know, it's like the bottom is a 4.5 square. The first ring, I use about 20 inches with a little extra. Got it?
I want you to go back to that 1.7. I didn't follow when you cut that piece. What's the 1.7?
How I came up with that?
No, how do yeah.
Or how do I cut it?
Yeah.
So I use a sled on my table saw. There's other ways of doing it. There's a wedgie. I've never used this, but we had it donated to the club. This is another type of a sled that it comes with templates that you put this up to the blade and you set the angles. I guess it works. I just never, I can't speak to it. I haven't used it.
I can. It worked extremely well.
Okay, there you go.
I got one too.
You like it? Good, good. The only difference with that is, and why I haven't pursued it, and it's not a positive or a negative necessarily, but when I'm working with something like red oak, and the way it's cut out of the board, you get that curling grain. What this one does is you cut the angles, you never flip the board over. You go from one side to the other, where what I find is the advantage of me doing this. So I'll make this pass, and it'll cut this angle, then I flip it over and go into it and make that cut. Now when I'm putting those rings together, I can manipulate that grain pattern, and I'll flip it over so it can get to be a wave versus it's going to be this all the way through. Just a personal thing, but whatever works for you.
Well, you could cut it that way, just use one side.
Sure, sure. Any other questions on that, guys?
1.7 is the length of the long side.
Correct.
That times the number of segments gives you Which side?
That 360 degrees, or the circumference. All right? So just talk about the table saw a little bit. I've got a full-blown Polymatic 66 cabinet saw in my shop. I actually like this little one. You can pick these up online, fairly reasonable. This one here, I just went out yesterday to see what's out there on Facebook Marketplace. Here's one for $49. Here's one for $30. Here's another one off of Craigslist for $40. What did I pay for that guy? I bought it from his son-in-law for $25. And it does everything you're going to need to do. And it's small and compact, it's lightweight. I hang it up on the wall when I'm not using it, rather than firing up my big stuff. So they're out there. I use a sled. I mentioned that. What makes a sled a extremely accurate device is running both of your miter gauges. So on your, what did you end up getting to do both?
Yeah.
Oh.
The one on the left is being recorded.
Okay. So I use both miter gauges. The first one I made, Bill Langen, you mentioned that you took a class from me back in the early days. It's just a piece of plywood. Piece of plywood and some hard maple for the tracks, and a piece of maple across for the guide. So it doesn't take a whole lot to do. Just when I happen to have some scrap aluminum that I made it out of, and that's more robust. So a sled or the wedgie device does come with the miter slot in it, a single one, but you're saying it works good, so we'll take your word for it. All right. So here it's showing how I cut it, and my beautiful wife was my hand model, so and she does it. She does this for herself and makes them. So what I use is my favorite tool is it's called a mechanic's pick. You can buy them in the automotive department. I think Home Depot has them in a pack of 4. So what I do with this is I put my wood down, I use my pick, and I pull it tight into the corner and slide it through, and slide it back. Take that segment out, flip the board over, hold it down. So it's just a safety thing. Keep your finger away from the blade. This saw does have a guide that I made for my classes. We're going to talk a little bit on the end here about ideas of a spin-off group to do strictly segmented turning. At that point, we're going to be using the saw stops here for extra safety. I've got to work with the CMWA to come up with a sled that we'll be using for that. It's non-conductive, so we don't fire the safety.
The good thing about that pick is that piece is loose.
The what?
That piece, the
Yeah.
cutoff,
Yeah.
it touches that blade, it's flat.
Yeah. Well, at least it's not your finger flying. Okay. All right. So let's talk about getting that angle correct first. Because that's probably the most critical thing if I'm doing segmented work. So again, I'm using I think it was a $9 compass that I picked up at Menards, I believe. And so what they tell you to do is you set it to this initially, and then you have some scrap wood to work with so that you're not using any of your good wood. So I use this like pine or something like that I have around the shop. I'll rip it to that dimension of the ring that I'm making based on my diagram, and I'll run that through and make a segment. I'll take that segment out and I'll measure it. It's like it looks good. I get it as close as I can, but then don't focus a lot on this anymore. You're getting it close. The best way to do it is to, for like a 12 segmented ring, cut 3 of them. And then use a quality machinist square or something that you can rely on. And I'll use that square. If it's a small enough segment, I'll just build the 3 segments within this right angle of my square. If it's bigger than that, I'll tend to go over to my being this is aluminum and true, I'll use it on my, as a straight edge here and build the 3 rings. And if they look good, I say, let's go for 3 more. So then I'll make 3 more to make half a circle. And then I'll put that up to the straight edge and say, see if that looks good. If all my gaps look good, I don't need to make any adjustments. I'll go on and make the full 12. I put a hose clamp on it. That's what I use to clamp all my rings together as a hose clamp. You can get them anywhere. One thing I would recommend is get them from the same manufacturer. I think they're universal, but I have had some that don't match together. So I don't need to buy some of every size ring because 2 hose rings will go together to make one larger hose ring. So a lot of times I'll have 2 or 3 rings when I start getting into some of my really large pieces. So I'm not going out and buying one that, I think the biggest one I've done was a 22-inch round by 48-inch high vessel. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put that hose clamp around it without glue in it, and then I'll hold it up to a light. So there I'm holding it up to my LED light, and I'm looking for cracks. If there's no gaps where I see the light through, I'm right on it. If it's not, I'll go back, make a slight adjustment to my fence on the sled, and I'll cut 12 more. Do the same thing until I know that I'm right. Once it's right, like on this fence, I can scribe a line in it, and I can go back and it's right there. I know what, I don't have to go through all the steps again.
Gary, do you use a stop to set the length, or are you just going by a pencil mark? Or?
Yeah, what I do on this one has an aluminum stop that I've machined in. My first ones, I put a block of wood on the stop and a C-clamp, all in place, and then I tap it one way or the other to make that length hit that 170 closer. Good question, man. Any other questions, Lower?
So Gary?
Yeah.
So when you're cutting your test pieces, you just can use scrap lumber for that?
Yep, and that's exactly what this one actually showed. I had some pine, I just made one up to make sure everything was right before I went in and made the pine, or the cherry wood, to make the bowl. So, and that works out well for me. Really good question. All right, so to snug that hose clamp up, you hold it up to the light, you look for gaps, everything looks good, you go into your good wood. After I've cut all these segments out, what I'll do is take a piece of, I'll lay them all out end to end with the length going down. So by that, what I'm saying is I'll take all 12 of them and lay them out end to end like so. Nice and snug. And this is where I talk about where I'm looking for a pattern in the grain. That's where I'll say like, oh, if I just flip that over, I'm going to give it, you know, that gets into a little much more detail. But so what I'll do is lay out 12 of them out. I know now how long I need to lay out my masking tape, just the standard masking tape. I wouldn't recommend the blue painter's tape, the classic tan masking tape, I think has a little more stick to it. So I'll put that down, glue side up. I have a couple of pieces that I tape the end down so it stays on my table. Now I'll take it from my dry fit and stick it to the glue on the tape and work my way all the way down. So there's Faye marking out how long it takes. And she's taking that end down and ripping that, or cutting the masking tape free from the roll. So now you're positioning it on that tape, and you don't have to be super critical, but as precise as possible without spending a lot of time in it. And what I mean by that is that, I wouldn't want one ring 1/8 of an inch off of the other ring. Otherwise, I've got a lot more to straighten out before I can put that on my bowl or start building the bowl. So you strive to keep the edges snug. Now, this is one of those terms to say a liberal amount. You know, you ask somebody, well, how much liquid did you, how much sticker did you put in there? Oh, a couple of plugs. You know, so you'll learn how much, little squeeze of glue, and I'm just putting it right into the V, and then I use a putty knife to spread the glue up on both sides. So what that's doing for me is it's pre-treating the wood. It's starting to go into the pores of the wood, and there's a hydraulic process that really works out nice there, because as you're going down the line, the first ones you can see that some of the glue is starting to run out of the V. So it's puddling down on the bottom. And you know, you got to work a little, you know, somewhat quickly to get that glue to keep it from running out of the joints. But the beauty of it dropping to the bottom of that V is, now what I'm going to do is bring that ring around, take it off the tape on the ends, and bring it around. So all that glue now that was on the bottom pushes itself back up to the top, so you get a super good glue bond. Now there's other ways, and that Ray Allen does it a whole different way, but whatever works for you. So you bring the strips together. One of the problems I have in my classes is that someone thinks, hey, I'm going to leave a little bit of tape so that I can bring that over and hold that ring together. If I catch them in time, I tell them don't do that, because if you get a little bit of tape that drops down into that joint when it comes together, now you got a gap there that you can't get rid of. But you'll notice the amount of glue that's squeezing out. That's why the paper towels are great to have handy. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it on a good solid surface and put either a piece of wax paper down or just a piece of scrap paper. That's a great time to use some of your printer paper that, you know, wasn't right, so you have to make another copy. So rather than just throwing that in the recycle bin, I'll use that just to put it down so I'm not transferring that glue onto my tabletop. And then I take a dead blow hammer and I just walk around the mold and make it as flatten it all out. So I'm cutting these all out of the same board. So in theory, they should all be uniform. So just a whack on that. One of the questions that's asked is how tight do I put that hose clamp? As tight as I need to without overdoing it. There's a point where you can over squeeze something, and they call that starving the joint, and it pushes all the glue out, but good and snug. So then we flatten that out. Remove the excess before you start pounding on it. That was a good idea. Keeps it off your chest and belly. So what I'm doing here is I'm just leveling all the segments out. And check your glue. I think Type Bond 2, that's the yellow glue, is 20-minute clamp time. So what I will do with this ring now is I will take it and write the time of day, or you know whatever the clock says, you know, 10:05. So I'll write that on there, knowing that it's got to sit for about 20 minutes. And then I set it aside to dry. The next step that I'll do is I'll take that ring. Did I lose it? I lost my flashing. I mean battery? Yeah. I'll talk loud. What I'll do is, my grandgirls, when they were young and sweethearts and naive, I would surprise them with some sidewalk chocolate. And it took a while before they said, Grandpa, where's the red? Oh, I must not have come with red, because I kept all the red out. Because what I'll do is I'll take that chalk, it works out really well. Here I'm showing an earlier version where I was using a red pencil. But I put the chalk on there, because now the next step I need to do is to true that up. And so they've wised up now, and when they want to use, draw a picture on my driveway, I'll go into my shop and grab the red. So what we did in the earlier days in the class, so this is going to aid just as a visual for flattening. And here again is where I use the spray adhesive. This is just standard sandpaper. I run 80 grit. coarse is actually better than too fine when it comes to a glue joint. You want that glue to have something to play. So I just made this out of pieces of plywood, put it together, trued it up on my lathe, and I spray adhesive to glue down. So that what Faye is showing there is that she's taking the ring and putting it up there. This is spinning on the lathe at a slow RPM. And she'll take it off and look, is there any chalk left? Yep, there's a little there, so put a little more pressure on there. And she'll do that until it's all gone. Then she'll draw the chalk around it one more time and make contact so that put it on with even pressure, take it off. If it's flat, it's flat. So that was the early days. When we do the class now, here we've got a Performax drum sander that will just fire it up, and we take turns getting a lot roll and run it through one side until the 6 are done, flip it over to the other side, and that works real slick. So we got a nice flat. But this works too if you don't have that and want to try it at home. So the low RPM, even pressure, expecting that chalk line.
Chalk it or with your pencil underneath.
Yep.
And then
Yep. So the next thing is you're going to start building that bowl blank up. So what I recommend that my students do is just build it up on a table, stacking your rings together, and then taking a pencil and drawing a line around it. And so what you're trying to do here is you're trying to build a brick wall. So each joint, the top joint matches the middle of the bottom joint. You get that, split that. It's like you're building a brick wall, and the mortar joint is halfway between the last brick. And the reason we put the pencil line on is this is the actual the clamp that we use in the class that I teach, and we put that in there. Then what we need to do is watch that pencil line, because glue has a tendency as you squeeze it down that it wants to skate over. So you want to watch that pencil line, make those adjustments, and bring it up slowly. And make an adjustment, bring it slowly, because again, you really only have. You've got about 3/8 of an inch to play with when you start turning this. So we want to be as accurate as possible in building that up. So and there's numerous ways to clamp these things up here. So this is again a clamp that I used in the class. If you made one similar, in order to compensate for that spigot or the tenon on the bottom, I'll usually cut a hole in the top board. And you know, I've done that before, where I use CNC clamps, whatever I got in the shop to make that straight down. That's one way of doing it. If you happen to have a drill press that you can lock the quill in place, that works good as a clamp. When I first started this and I was teaching classes out of my garage, I made a bunch of these up, just pipe fittings basically, and some off-the-shelf iron from Midway Iron, and I made some clamps like that. That worked. Your lathe is a good clamp there. You made that faceplate with the sandpaper on it. You bring your tailstock up to it, and you place them in there. That works good. What works even better is if you have a live center that you can use, that you can mount your faceplate to it. So now I can build one ring at a time. I've locked this into the chuck. I know it's true. I can put the first ring on it, bring it up, and I use the tool rest as my dial indicator. So when I rotate it, I make sure that the ring is perfectly in a nice perfect rotation, that it's not touching anywhere. That is the #1 way that I do it now. But if you didn't have the adapter and the threaded live center, just by having a piece of plywood that has you make the mark for your live center, and you just go back to that every time, and just that you might need 2 hands to hold the board on, where this way I can use both hands in position, ring, and bring my tailstock up close.
Gary, do you bond them all together in one move, or are you doing maybe on a smaller vessel?
So, good question.
Yes.
when we do it in the class, we're doing it in that class, we're doing it all at once, just because of the nature of the clamping. On my lathe, I do one run at a time. Now, I don't necessarily adhere to the 20-minute clamp time. I'll put that on and squeeze it up within a few minutes. I know that it's stuck. And I'll do the next one. And you could break that loose, but it takes a lot, within 5 minutes.
But you'll wait 20 minutes clamp time, how long will it before you spin it?
Honestly, and we had, remember your name guy that came from Wyoming and did what was his name? He did it down at Paramount. He's quite an accomplished segment turner. You're turning is one of the clamp time, you got enough hold there. He said,
Gary, you want to give me the mic?
what's that? All right, so that's pretty much the end of my slides. I just have a couple of resource slides here. The American Association of Woodturners does have a segmented spin-off of their own. If you go to the symposium this year, it's in Memphis? Louisville. Friday night is the segmented woodturners night. We get together and have demonstrations and things like that. But you can see some of the stuff that people are doing. This is unbelievable. So that's just segmentedwoodturning.org, again, a division of the American Association of Woodturners. YouTube is a great place to go out and get some information. And there's all kinds of ones that show different ones. I was playing one day, and if you want to stop up here later and just see, well, you can change the whole look by using different colored woods and have fun with it that way. But that's it. That's like, any other questions? I know I said it's simple.
Yes.
Trust me, it is simple once you get into it. Once you've done that first one, it makes sense to you. Debbie?
So on the segmented bowl, on the first roll, you did the masking tape and rolled it and glued it. Do you do that each roll, or after this first roll, you just build off of that?
Good question. No, you do each ring individually.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. Guy?
The only thing is, go back to that 1.7, that gives you circumference. If you had to cut it at 2 inches, you would just have to turn away more wood.
Right. And so what makes segmented turning a whole lot of fun for me is that I put this on my lathe and I know that I'm going to go from that point to the next point and I've got the shape that my picture says. I don't have to, and I've seen guys use 2-inch boards and just do the whole thing in 2-inch boards and it's, wow, that's a lot of wood to turn out. Where now I'm just basically going corner to corner. But can do it, you certainly. Yeah.
Question, Gary, when you're assembling your segmented layers, and when you put one layer on top of the next, and then you do the half off,
Yep.
your offset, can you do like a third or a quarter?
Sure, you could. Especially, I think that last slide they were showing where a guy did it to give it a twisted look. Yeah, yeah, there you go.
If you remember Lenny Mertens and his dizzy bowls.
Yeah. Some pictures up here, here's some of the work that I had that I happen to have some pictures laying around. To give you an idea on this, this one on the end here where it's full 48 inches high and I think 22-inch diameter. That was made up of 1,962 individual pieces of wood. And so I mentioned that I do market my stuff, and only because it gives me room to make the next one. There's nothing to do with an income, it's just I like moving it out. So that piece was named 1962. And what I will do on my next one, I will never make another 1962. I will change something so that I have a different number to name it that. And that's burned in the bottom of the vessel with the date. That one I did sell that one. That was it sold for $3,500. That's pretty common price range that I get for the bigger ones. And that one will have that worksheet rolled up, and it has all my notes. And if I happen to spill glue on it, or not, I don't drink coffee, but maybe my Diet Coke stained a little bit on it, that's just part of it. So it's when I show that at a gallery, oftentimes they'll tape that worksheet up behind there so that people can see what went into making this. It helps make it a little more attractive for the art collectors. The other thing that's fun about segment returning, if you want to get into hollow forms, but you don't want to invest and you don't want to go through that learning curve of doing a hollow form, this is actually, you could consider this 2 bowls put together. So I do it in 2 pieces. And I think the joint is somewhere in here. So I'll turn that first piece, and then I'll turn the other piece separate, and I'll keep double checking the fit for it and turning it and making it shape just more on the inside. I try to get that inside so that there's no, I think if you reach down there you won't find a gap, maybe. But that's how I do it, a hollow form. That's the same way I do these big ones. My recommendation for you, if you're using a standard bowl gouge, and that's what I use, Ray Allen used, page through that, the guy is unbelievable. Not doing anything about wood turning until he's 65, and then gets in most of his tools he made out of files. He'd take a file, good hardened steel, and he would create scrapers and use that. And this is where the segment work really shines. If you put in a natural log, what's going to happen is you're going to start turning long grain, and then you got end grain. Then you got long grain and end grain, and long grain and end grain. That long grain is going to chip out as you come around the end grain, and it just can be real frustrating. I guarantee you, if you try this, you're going to fall in love with segmented turning because you're cutting nothing but long grain. There's no, it just literally sings as you're turning. This is all the way around. It's awesome. One thing I would recommend, though, I use a bowl gouge. I use a 5/8 bowl gouge when I turn my segments. But I don't like to go more than 3 rings at a time before I shape them and then continue to move on. That's getting far enough that I wouldn't want to make this up here and then reach all the way down there. It's just, there's no need to do that. So the question was asked about clamp time and glue time. 20 minutes on gluing the rings together as well. Within 20 minutes, it's ready to go. So when I make these, this is usually my January project where I got a heated garage that I do my work in, but God, when it gets down to 20 below, I just hate to heat that garage up to a comfortable working temperature. So that's when I make these. I will go out and make 3 rings a night. So I cut the rings, glue that into with the hose clamps, make 3 of those. First night, I go in the house. That took me maybe 35 minutes. The next night I'll go out. First thing I'll do is I'll take those rings, I'll run them through my sander, which I have a similar sander to that. I'll flatten them out and start stacking them and gluing them, get that clamped. Then I'll go make 3 more rings, and then I go in the house. Now when I come out the next night, those ones that were clamped on the lathe, I'll true those up. Then I'll take these, run them through the sander, and stack them up, and then I'll make 3 more. So people, the question I would always get is, how many hours do you have in that thing? You know, the reality is that took about a week, you know, of no more than an hour a night. So it's amazing how productive you can be with these. Once you get going, once you get that formula down and understand that, and there would be a guy, that would be a case where I don't want to turn away 1.5 inches of wood to get down to my size. I want to get that calculation as perfect as I can, so I'm not taking out any more wood, and I'm making my scrap wood pile last even longer because I'm not wasting a lot of wood. But any other questions that come to mind? Yeah.
Your inlays that you have here, is that, would be like you make that for that bowl up there?
Correct.
So when you build them first?
Yep. This one here is this one that I sold. And the way I do that, if you come up and look later, you'll see the glue lines. I know I belong to the CMWA, the Central Minnesota Woodworkers Association as well. And whenever they do a project, they always talk about figure 10% over, 10% waste. So have a 10% extra wood when you start something, because you don't want to get halfway into the project and, oh, I didn't do that right, shoot, I got to go back to start with ripping, planing, sanding, to get back to where I was because I screwed up one board. So if you have that extra board, you make it through that. It's the same thing on this. I'll make at least 3 extra ones for my desired amount, so that if there's one that sometimes that you don't see it until you've done the final sanding, and it's like, oh, I didn't like how that grain or coloration matched up. And I've learned now as I go, this would be another example if you come up and look, that you'll see that there's just some of the grain I learned as I went that the grain is going in a different direction to me that stands out in my eye. Someone else probably would never notice it, but. So I talked about the segue into starting a spin-off group of segmented work. This is kind of what I'd like to do in this, is that how do we do this? So this is something that the vision is that we're going to take advantage of the open shop time. So that'll give us 2 nights a month that we can come in here. We have the lathes, we have the woodworkers, we have the equipment to use. We have people here that can help you if you don't understand it. But then we'll get into doing more of this type of stuff. And again, it looks complex, but I think I can work with you and I'll share my learning curve on how to do it and how to do it more efficiently. First few I made, I fumbled through it quite dramatically. But anyway, so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I haven't used it for segmented turning. The trick I learned for gluing surfaces together so they don't shift.
Yep.
Fill the table salt with glue.
I've heard that, yeah.
And that grit keeps them flat.
Good point. That would be worth trying if you're going to try this at home and have that issue. What Ms. Ray Allen did was he cut little wedges and super glued them around the dry fit and then put the glue on. Now it had a stop that it didn't shift on. So that's another way of doing it. It's just one more step. Doing it on the lathe really helped me with being able to dial that in. Now, well, any other questions? Yeah, Bob.
Do you play with the thickness of the ring depending on the shape of the bowl for the visual? Very
good question there. If you look at,
or is it more when it's on scale, like 1962, detonated?
what I do, and this is one of the learnings for me, this was one of the first bowls I did when I just was setting the thing up. If you look at this one, and if I take my caliper and because you're really not looking at the thickness on a contour, you're looking at the face, the surface. So if I measured that, I started out with a 3/4 inch board, and I'm almost at 1 inch face. A tighter radius is even going to be more dramatic. So what I will do on that, for that ring, I've got it glued up for my 3/4 inch material like every other ring that I did. I've got the Performax sander, and I'll run that through, and I'll start measuring. I can, again here, this is where having your worksheet works out well for you, because you can look at the radiuses here and measure them on the paper and say, boy, that's not gonna work. But what happens if I'll put a little mark on there at 3/4 of an inch, and then I'll spin my thing over and say, oh, I gotta take that down to 5/8 in order to make that look like 3/4 inches. I'm losing most of you there, I know, but there's some things that you'll learn as you do this. What I love about this is, I'm kind of an analytical guy. I do not call myself a perfectionist at all, but I like control. Not a control freak. I like making the wood do what I want it to do and not doing what the wood wants it to do. But the other ways of doing some accent figures is, this is an example where I did a full stick of laminations. And then I cut the segments out and put them in so I could get that laminated look all the way around. So that's another thing we can talk about in the group. So where we're at with the group is this. Next week, I meet with the board of directors from those woodworkers to get their buy-in and commitment. Once that happens, next month we can talk more about it and set something up. What I'm proposing for both clubs is that in order to be in the segmented club, you need to be a member of both the Woodturners and the CMWA. We're using $4,000 table saws there. They bought those. The least we can do is kind of help out. So I think they get 25, 30. So it'd be at the $30, but now you're going to be able to use the saw. When I take the class, if you were to take my class, and that's coming up next week or in 2 weeks, I don't know if there's any openings in it or not, but in order to be efficient in time, I've already cut the rings out and they're in baggies. So when you come in, what we're going to do the first night is we're going to put the rings together, clamp them, and after 20 minutes we're going to be sanding them, putting them in the clamp, and leaving for that night with them clamped up. The next night we're taking them out of the clamp, going right to the lathe and start shaping. So it's a 2-night class because of the dry time that we want to do. So you can check that out if you're interested. This is the bowl, similar to what you'll be making. And any other questions? That's about all I have for you. I'll hang around for a while if you have more questions you want to talk to me individually. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. Volume up here? I don't know. Can't hear me. I'll talk loud. Thank you for the presentation on it. We had the 50-50 drawing, and we're looking for ticket number 037. 814. 814. And if nobody claims it, I get to keep it even though I didn't buy a ticket.
I know who won.
Eddie got her!
Regular.
There we go.
How much did you make?
$20.
Maybe you can go back to the side and see
I got it.
He's got plenty.
Guy, draw another one.
Oh, you want to draw another one?
He's awesome. He's inviting us all down to the bar to have a drink on it.
I gotta get here today.
799. 799. 799.
You want to explain what this drawing is?
Oh, so when you came in, you had a chance to buy a ticket. $1 a piece, 3 for $5. And it's a 50-50 drawing, so the club keeps 50% of it. The person whose number is drawn, except it's Eddie. Eddie get that. So there was $40 in the pot, so $20.
Well, 41, but we keep the overage.
Oh, pays for the coffee. So, that's it. I'm going to be around until 2 o'clock, so if you want to stay and visit, if you want to get a lathe out and turn a little something, you can. To help clean up a little bit, that would be great. Thank you much.